Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building all the ways we'll create and consume news in the future. Today, I'm excited to talk to Liam Andrew. Liam's been working with machine learning and AI for a lot longer than most of us. He worked on the product team at the Texas Tribune for more than 8 years before making the jump earlier this year to the American Journalism Project, where he serves as technology lead for its product and AI studio, which obviously has a huge focus on how newsrooms can leverage AI. Liam constantly talks to local newsrooms all over the country, so he has a front row seat into what their challenges are, how AI can help, and how it's actually being used day to day. I loved getting into the weeds with Liam. He and I talked about AI newsroom issues, big and small, like whether or not ChatGPT is actually any good at headlines, but also things like the ethics of using generative images. We tackle some pretty heavy issues in the state of media today, and I hope you listen to the end, where he gives some excellent advice for newsrooms who may be closer to the beginning of their AI journey than the end. And of course, if you do enjoy the conversation, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend or a colleague, and I'd be grateful if you consider subscribing to the Media Copilot newsletter if you haven't already. Links in the show notes. I'd also really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating or review in whatever podcast app you might be in. Those really do help the show get in front of some more people. And lastly, feel free to check out everything we offer, including AI training classes for media, marketing, and PR professionals at mediacopilot.ai. Okay, here's my conversation with Liam Andrew, technology lead at the American Journalism Project. Liam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So I'm super excited to talk to you. I know you and I sort of shared a panel like 5 or 6 months ago or something like that, which funnily enough is now live online somewhere. We did that for the WordPress folks. But ever since then, I've wanted to chat with you and sit down and just get a little bit more from you on AI and journalism, what you're seeing. Obviously, you were at the Texas Tribune for a long time. Now you're at the American Journalism Project. So you're the guy I want to turn to. Like, what's going on with respect to AI in newsrooms today? Because, you know, you're working with them and figuring that out. So you're kind of on the front lines. So, but first, give me a little more background on you, how you got into all this, and particularly how you sort of the path went for you into, and now for all of us, but for you, probably earlier than most, into more of an AI oriented place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 8 months ago or so when we last spoke, I was eons ago in AI time.
Was that 8 months ago? Damn.
Yeah, I don't remember what was happening in AI land at the time, but none of us do. Yeah, my background comes. So I was at the Texas Tribune for 8 or 9 years prior to joining American Journalism Project. I had started at AJP about 4 months ago. So this role is fairly new to me. And I was at Texas Tribune for about 9 years, but my background was in software engineering and especially in machine learning and natural language processing. That was, about a dozen years ago in a previous generation of
a previous prior
generation of AI technology and certainly of machine learning tasks. I was following what was happening in that space after working in it. But my work was primarily working with the Texas Tribune, leading the product team there and kind of focusing on the organization there for a few years. When ChatGPT dropped, that I got really excited about technology again. I'll just put it that way. I mean, that's too simple. I was always excited, but that was just kind of I was a moment where I just felt like I wanted to dig in. It kind of brought me back to those roots, working in machine learning, natural language processing, and some of the things that AI could do now that it couldn't do then, or it couldn't do at scale, or at the price, or at the availability of it was new. One thing that was really exciting to me there was taking a lot of those projects that I'd wanted to do for a long time, but just didn't seem feasible or within our budget or within our, just the things we should be doing at the Tribune. And suddenly they seemed to become feasible, both because they became more available or affordable, and because there was a lot of excitement about this stuff. And so we could start seeking out funding that was not available before because this stuff just didn't feel very exciting to funders. So we were able to do some really interesting, exciting projects at the Texas Tribune. Many of them are still ongoing there. But it was so much fun to me that I really wanted it to be my full time, always on job, instead of just one of the many things that you have to do as a product leader at
Right.
about
You wanted to play with the AI tools and not just worry quite as much about the CMS and newsletters, at least with or whatever else site maintenance, I guess, and SEO.
Yeah,
Not that
all very
AI
important
can't do
stuff.
stuff
Right,
around that, but yeah,
right,
yeah, very
right.
exactly.
So when the opportunity came up to work at AJP, I really was so excited about it. It's been a lot of fun working with them.
Cool. And so, what's AJP like? And just to clarify, so what is it? I understand it's mostly designed to sort of help local newsrooms. Tell me about what the whole project is, how it's funded, and how you have this great opportunity to figure out how to introduce and introduce a whole new generation of newsrooms to AI. I guess I would say, but
Yeah,
go on.
absolutely. So American Journalism Project, we call ourselves a venture philanthropy, which it's like a venture capital firm in a way, but we're doing philanthropy. It's all to nonprofits. We're a nonprofit giving grants to nonprofit newsrooms. Where the venture part comes is really that we are, along with just giving the grants, we're also supporting these newsrooms as they navigate the growth that comes with this additional grant, and so the strategy that they want to come forward with. All of our newsrooms, we have a portfolio of about 40 nonprofit newsrooms. All of them have major local impact, their own local newsrooms, or if they're not, some of them are national, but they have local focus in some form or another. They're all looking to grow when we give them grant funding. They have a vision, see a market that they can grow into, and want to get in there. There are a couple of requirements. They can't have a paywall. There are a couple things that we require of our newsrooms, but otherwise, we give the grants, and then we help oversee how to best and advise them on how to best use those grants. I would say AJP started with mostly advising the publishers, the CEOs, the executives, the founders, and helping them to kind of build a business from scratch or grow the business that they have. And they're looking at what I'm doing now is working in the product and AI studio, which was actually, it started as a grant given by OpenAI about a year and a half ago. And that's really looking at growing other parts of the organization besides just the sort of the business leads. We're kind of looking a level below there and saying, how can we help the product leads or the technology leads? How can we help the editors understand AI? How can we help these organizations become more fluent with technology and product thinking and strategy more broadly? So that's really what we're doing at the studio.
So how does it work generally when you work with one of these newsrooms? Is it like they're pitching you specific things they want to do? Do you swoop in with a bunch of sort of default things that kind of work? And is it like how does that work when you sort of work hand in hand with one of these?
Sure. Well, with the product and AI studio, we certainly don't know. We can't swoop in with templates that work because I don't think anybody has that yet. But so the way
Good business for me.
unless you do, in which case let us know. The product and AI studio, what we've been doing so far has been rounds of grants directly to our newsrooms. So we have, again, 40 newsrooms in our portfolio. We had one round of an open call for applications from those newsrooms to fund specific projects that they had in mind. And you can find them on our website. There's 13 grantees that are in our current round, which range in size from very small to medium large size newsrooms. Those projects that they pitched range from doing revenue projects to editorial research projects to editorial production work, streamlining efficiency, finding new data sources, work like that. So those projects were selected before I joined. They started at the beginning of this year. We have a couple 1-year grants and then a number of 2-year grants as well. So right now, my role and the role of my colleague Doreen Mendoza, who is sort of the other counterpart in the studio, is to help them move those projects forward. They had a vision for them, or maybe it was a vague vision. Maybe it's pivoted a little as they've learned how AI works, or doesn't work for the job that they're trying to do. But the main goal has been to help them learn and to teach each other about how it's going. So we have monthly cohort meetings with all 13 of those grantees. We'll have a presenter, sometimes a guest, sometimes it's a grantee that we see making progress that wants to show off what they're doing and get some feedback from their peers. So I think we're all learning together. We certainly don't have a playbook, and we don't necessarily don't know how to swoop in and help people yet.
Mhm.
We're all figuring this out together. We're very open about that.
No, but it sounds like there's a great dialogue going on, and I'd be super curious, to whatever extent you could talk about it. My sense, probably is that when a newsroom sort of first starts thinking about, applying AI to their workflows, they go for sort of the low hanging fruit, right? They're kind of thinking about, how do I more quickly get social copy? How do I don't know, do some research or sort emails or what have you? And I'm sort of curious if that's still true to a large extent today, particularly with smaller shops, or are they starting to think a little bit more about AI holistically or getting more ambitious with their projects? Just give me a sense, like what's sort of the state, at least from the picture that you're seeing, of integrating AI into journalism operations today.
Yeah. So as I said, it's intentionally broad right now, but we've got a couple of projects that are aiming to be public facing. One of which is actually, I think, now in public beta, which is Spotlight PA, has an election assistant that's bilingual, answers readers' questions about how to vote, who represents them, questions like that. We also have the city in our portfolio. They're working on a tip bot, I guess is what they're calling it. So a reader can submit tips, and it kind of helps the reader walk through what's needed in order to submit a helpful tip to the staff. So we have a couple of those. Those are kind of, really ambitious and I think, understandably nerve-wracking for these newsrooms to try to put together a public-facing AI tool. So, but I'm so excited about those, just that they're trying something that ambitious and that big, and it's, so far so good.
Well, for public facing stuff, just to stop there for a sec, there's always sort of the concern of like hallucinations, right? And it's going to like end up getting off the guardrails and start spewing out hateful nonsense or something, right? Is there sort of a go-to strategy or technique these days of essentially preventing that? What is your sense?
Sure. So we're trying a couple of different approaches with these two newsrooms. With Spotlight PA, they partnered with a firm called DALL-E, a startup that primarily works in childcare chat assistants, or at least that's where they got their start. And they have a whole system that's basically a CMS behind, or a layer between ChatGPT or the LLM they're using, and the user. That's kind of getting pre-canned responses, caching them, making sure that an editor has reviewed pretty much every response that's coming in and out. That's it's a lot more work that way, but it's certainly it's doing the work of those guardrails, and are really really heavy guardrails, I would say.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to you talked about public facing things and chatbots. How are some of these places thinking about using it internally?
Yeah. So we have a couple of places. I would say one big theme is revenue projects. So we have this Han Journal in the Twin Cities. They're working on a media kit builder, which is, I think, a really cool idea that allows for custom sales pitches. Essentially, the chief salesperson can go in to the chat interface and say, "Hey, I need to go pitch the Department of Transportation today to buy some sponsored content, or to buy some ads, or to host an event. And what can you tell me about our readership? What can you tell me about our coverage that can help me really sell this? Do we have good images to put in the media kit? Questions like that." So there's a lot of aspects of that, and I think we're still figuring out the most valuable piece of that. What's the most difficult part for the sales team that we can make easier? But I'm really excited about that project, just as something kind of a personalized sales builder. So that's one example. We also are working on some customized membership messaging, encouraging donors to donate if we know that they are really interested in a specific issue or cause. Can we tailor our messaging, encouraging them to donate to highlight the work that we know that they care about? So a lot of work around personalization, segmenting for revenue. The other part I'd say on the back of house kind of work that we're doing is on editorial research and production.
Okay.
We've got a lot of that. We are, for instance, for editorial research, I would point to, we have a custom GPT that's being built by iNewsSource in San Diego. That is they're calling it, I think, a PRA bot, like a public records request assistant. What it knows, and it has been fed a lot of the public documents and the agencies that can supply them, and sort of what information is out there that the city of San Diego or the region in Southern California has, and how can I ask for it? What's the way to phrase this request so that I get the data that I want? And it's gone. They've found a lot of uses that I think they didn't expect in there, which is really really exciting. I think the first idea was, this will be really useful for generating for public records requests, and then they realized that's not really the hard part. We can write public records requests. The hard part is figuring out who has the data that we need and how to ask for it in a way that makes sure that we get the data that we need the first time that we ask. And so it sounds like this GPT is doing a lot of the work based on the data that they've gotten in the past from these agencies, and the policies that these agencies have to go for the next questions.
That's pretty smart. I mean, it's really smart actually, in that, a part of what is involved in making AI really work for you, I think you've really nailed it. It's like, well, what is really the hard part? Like finding that. And honestly, I think that's not necessarily entirely obvious at first. I mean, and I could go back to sort of the default use case for AI in editorial generally, or content generally, is, just get it to write some articles. And, we could talk about that a bit, and we probably should, but it is often, like, in terms of like doing a story for a news site or a publication, is not really the hard part. It's more like finding the right story to write, getting the information you need, getting your sources, and just sort of framing it in the right way. Like, that's the hard part. And we could talk a little bit about how applying AI to any or all of that. But I think this is where someone like you, as a product guy, kind of can really sort of have these conversations with the editors and the reporters and really break it down and like figure out, okay, here's the thing, like anyone could probably, there probably already exists something like a FOIA bot, right? Like, or something like that, but which is sort of close to what you're talking about, is sort of where my mind went when you were talking about public records and getting them. But actually sort of filing the request isn't necessarily the thing people have trouble with. It's fairly straightforward. It's like, knowing which agency to go to even for it, and the precise information you want. And if there's AI, if I can help in that, awesome. That sounds great.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and that's a good example too, where when you're focusing on the hard part for these editors or for reporters and in editorial, my first assumption was similar to many, that one of the big early use cases of AI would be, it'll write the headlines for us. This is great. We don't need to worry. We don't have to argue about what headline to use anymore. And then talking to a lot of editors, they find actually that's a part of the job that they want to own, and they have good reasons to. And it's not just because they have some fear of AI or that they have some sort of that they're not. It's not that they're super protective of it. It's just that they actually are good at it, and they've trained themselves or been trained on it. And there are plenty of aspects of generating leads and copy that they aren't trained on or don't love to do, that maybe AI will be really helpful for, or at least giving them some drafts or going back and forth with them. But actually, the headline was not the hard part, and bringing that to an editor actually, it sounded a little tone deaf for some of them. That said, I don't need this. Like, why AI is not actually going to help me? It's a bad step to start with if you're starting with the wrong solution for them.
Yeah.
So I think, and just having, dialogue with a couple of the folks in the newsrooms that really do understand both sides of these, the product side and the editorial side, and hearing their take on what's really going to be useful, and what's really a pain for editors that can be solved. That's the place to start always. And so I made the wrong assumption, certainly at the beginning of working with this stuff, and I was glad to be corrected and continue to learn all that.
Can definitely understand the whole topic of headline ownership. Though I will say, I like to get ideas
Yeah,
from AI. I like,
and
I almost, I wouldn't say I never. I sometimes the out of the box stuff is pretty good, but I usually at least tweak it.
SEO is a good example where some editors, feel more comfortable with it than others, and some of them say, "Oh, I would love to just to let a bot do this," and then some of them don't. I
Mhm.
think there are lots of tools out there that are helping with this work, and some of it's really helpful and time saving for some newsrooms, and then other newsrooms try it and say, "This is it for me," and that's great. I like that they're trying it and figuring out what is helpful for their newsroom and what isn't, and not everything is going to be a cure all for that for every newsroom. I think every newsroom is different.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as we've been talking about, there's a lot of great applications of AI. I like to sort of divide up the story process and the editorial process into like three buckets, or really sort of three parts of a pipeline, right? Where it's like there's the sort of story generation idea part, and then there's the middle part, which is the story writing, and then there's the distribution, editing, promotion part, right? And it feels like for any organization early in their journey, or even most of the parts of their journey, is like the two ends of the pipe is where AI can make a lot of difference in the current process. But let's talk a little bit about the middle process, right? Because that always comes up and keeps coming up. Certainly in the early days of generative AI, which was really only just a couple of years ago now, but it's kind of funny.
James, if you are right,
Yeah, the days of yore when it was cute to have places try to write articles for them,
right,
either sort of at a scale play or just kind of trying to do more with less play, and most of them didn't go well.
no,
And now the thing is, what I've noticed is this use case isn't going away. And most recently, ESPN has decided to start using AI to generate articles about what they would call undercovered sports. But they do seem to have put in more guardrails than the sort of previous attempts at this. I guess, just getting your view on this. One, well, a couple things. Is anyone sort of requesting that or thinking about that? And the folks you're talking to, and two, just like what is your broad sense of it? Do you have any philosophical points of view even on it? Like should this be used very sparingly, very certain use cases, etc.? Like, what's your take on robots writing articles?
yeah, I'll start with that second question. I think that's a really big one, a deep one, and because I think robots writing articles, for the most part, I would say no, not a great idea. There are some cases where all you need is some information. If it's the stocks, or if it's sports scores at a very basic level, maybe not trying to make a narrative out of it. If you just want some data, then a bot could write an article. But why are we writing articles about this? And as that sort of becomes a more fundamental product question than it is
Hmm.
a coverage or AI question. That I think we are going to be seeing changes to the way that information is distributed, that I think is going to remove that need for trying to create an article out of one data or two data points. And I think I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming from that, and certainly can't predict all the future here, but I think there's more that's going to be coming that AI will help with, and we'll be able to turn into some narrative forms. But I don't think putting an article together and publishing that to the web is going to be the future of that kind of tool.
Right. It seems that to the extent that it's used, it's always, if it is used, and again, you kind of have to assume it's done in a way that uh, the hallucinations and egregious problems are eliminated more or less. Maybe the tiny bits here and there, but very very rare. Um, but that even with that, it's always going to be sort of a peripheral tool. Well, always, caveated with a star, like AGI or super intelligence notwithstanding.
I
But yeah, it's,
I think that's right, and so at the core of the work that we're doing and then most newsrooms are doing, I don't think that's the best use case. It's certainly not one that that newsrooms at AJP are requesting or are thinking heavily about. That's partly because of the kind of journalism that most AJP newsrooms are doing, which is tends to lean more on the investigative side, or on sort of accountability journalism and stuff that requires enough reporting that it's hard to have a bot writing it. There's not a lot, the type of local news that we're doing, although it's not true of all local news, is not usually, it's not heavy on dailies. It's usually longer form, and even if it's quicker turn, it's about, it's not something that's easily captured in a data point or in a wire. So I think that's part of the reason. It's just not the type of coverage that most AJP newsrooms are focused on.
Cool. So you mentioned a bit ago, there's better, perhaps more ambitious things that newsrooms can sort of think about in terms of using AI. We talked a little bit about some of the low-hanging fruit that you're kind of working on. What do you think is kind of next level there? Are you already starting to see organizations think about how to apply it in sort of bigger picture ways, more organizational ways? What are you seeing out there? And also, like, what would you love to sort of like sink your teeth into as kind of an AI journalism project, even if it hasn't been sort of proposed or worked on yet?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good example of what we're looking at for our next round of grant making that's coming up. So I mentioned that these 13 newsrooms that we're working with now, that was our first round. We've got funding in place to do another round of grants that's coming in the next month. The two themes that we're focused on are revenue diversification and civic information, which I know are very broad themes. I can dig into each of them. I'd say with revenue diversification, I'll start there. I think our development teams, our revenue teams, are really overworked, trying too hard to put too many applications together. There's too many requirements, and a lot of in philanthropy in general, they spend so much time trying to fit the same language into different boxes. It's like round peg, square hole all the time when they're putting together an application or talking to a funder about why this work is worth supporting. I don't think that ChatGPT or any sort of AI tool is going to do that work for them. But I think if you take the corpus of all the applications you've written in the past and all the impact statements that you have, and if you've documented well as a news organization on a revenue team, you're starting at a much quicker pace to getting the next thing out than you were if you don't have if you don't have that history, that documentation. So I'm excited about some of the potential there. Things like award applications are a thorn in the side of a lot of news organizations. They spend a lot of time on those.
Yeah.
Can we streamline those processes? So that's one that I'm excited about, that we're going to be focusing on. And we're going to be. I certainly don't have the answers or even all the ideas for this, and we're going to be talking and collaborating with our newsrooms on what else. What are their pain points, and really focusing in on how we can help them. The other one that's.
No, I was just, you mentioned the revenue diversification. I was curious about, you mentioned that the sites can't have a paywall.
Yeah.
Are there other things that are not sort of off limits? You think about revenue, you think about, like, at least in the private, for private sector, it's like you think about things like events, and could you have a membership that is separate from a paywall, et cetera? These are more strategy questions, I guess, but I don't know if that's anything that you're
I'd
working
say
on.
it's fluid. I mean, I think we're not, that you can't say like you're not allowed to charge for anything you make. Like, certainly there are a couple that have premium products or side hustles, basically, that maybe they do some B2B work or things like that. And that's okay. Like, I think we allow earned revenue. It's important to do. We more than allow it, we encourage it. And I think there's, plenty of opportunities there. So I would say the way that we think about the no paywall ethos is that your core product should not have that should be free to access for the community that you're covering.
But if you want to launch some games,
right,
have that.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah, no, we're not going to be too rigid about that. And then the other big theme that I'm really excited about digging into for our next round of grants is it's going to be on civic information, as I said, which is more on the editorial side, most likely. Specifically, this challenge of this opportunity we all have with meeting minutes and transcripts, and I think that's the biggest. We have seen everybody has this idea right now. There are so many tools out there that are trying to do meeting minutes at scale, and it was a problem that I saw at the Texas Tribune, for instance. Texas legislature meets every 2 years. They spend 5 months in several chambers, and our editorial staff has to be there all the time. There is always a reporter in every one of those rooms, and most of the time it's a waste of their time to be there, but they have to be there in case it is something really big happens. And once in a while it does, so we keep sending people, and we are just short staffed, and really we were just at the end of our rope by the end of legislative session. Just it's too much work to do that. So that's just one example among many, and on the local newsrooms trying to cover bigger and bigger areas and more meetings. It could be city hall meetings, it could be school board meetings. So how can AI help with kind of growing the range of coverage you can have and saving some time and letting reporters, for instance, do what they do best, which is, sourcing information a little bit more organically than just sitting in a meeting. So
yeah, it's funny. You just gave me a idea, because obviously I've heard this before, but the way you expressed it actually gave me an idea. Like for when I was a tech reporter and also at CoinDesk, there was a lot of event coverage we would do.
Oh yeah,
and often it's very similar. You send reporters to events in the hope that some news will break, and it's either something rote or there's nothing, and you've just wasted their time. If having a bot go over the transcript and then some editor makes a judgment on whether it's a story or not, that would be a good way to efficiently make sure that the reporter is actually spending time on those sort of bigger picture things. So yeah, free idea for those you covered events.
absolutely. Well, and then speaking of events, the reverse of that, at the Texas Tribune, we did about 50 events a year that we host, and we interview lawmakers. Or we'll interview community members, and that's another place where I was seeing some opportunities for the Tribune, is how to how to save time for us as we're producing those events. After the event, can we turn around a transcript quickly that allows for more accessibility? Can you do some more automatic summarization of those events so that somebody can just skim through it if they don't have time to read them or listen to the whole thing, and can they help them search through it, understand what's most important to them in there. So I think there's just a lot in there of like, here's a fire hose of information. How can we distill it to something that's as important that's important just for you? So I'm excited about that. There's a lot in there, and sort of the subject of civic information, all kinds of data that we've talked about. We're talking about, could we automate or web scraping to make it a little easier to get data sources at scale? Could we do a little bit more collection of this public data? Just get everything a little bit more organized, because right now it's a mess when you're trying to get all this information digitally or in person, and usually it's some ugly combination.
Let's talk a little bit about sort of other media. So, which I'm thinking specifically about: images, video, audio. Um, it seems to me when you talk about images, particularly with local and cash-strapped newsrooms, who you might have, certainly there's a lot of stock imagery out there, but now you have this option in a lot of places to have generative images. And there's a whole host of sort of ethics, and I think a lot of the issues around using AI, and sort of everything from the copyright issues to the audience disclosure issues sort of are much more stark when you start looking at images, because you can actually see it. And so I'm curious, one, obviously, certainly the projects you're seeing, how much they involve these kind of multimedia. Why don't we just stick with images for a second? And if you have any thoughts on their sort of the ethical use of them, and how you, particularly for like obviously newsrooms, and because I used to work at CoinDesk, there was a lot of financial news, a lot of stories were very abstract because it was all about numbers and whatever. And so if I think about the ability to just conjure up an image that's sort of based on the text that's a little more abstract, that seems like a very useful tool. But then you also think about like what is the economy that it's disrupting, and what are the disclosures that you need, like what is the right way that a newsroom that would want to take advantage of these tools to actually do so.
Yeah, that's a big one. Certainly something I've thought about a lot. It's not honestly something that AJP newsrooms have come to us with ideas or concerns. Concerns is too strong. There's certainly some concerns, but it hasn't been a focus as we've mostly been honed in on text, and I would say, and sort of data sourcing and production. But I think it's the main place I do hear about it is certainly with ethics questions. And one thing that we are strongly encouraging all of our newsrooms to do, and the first thing that we did at the Texas Tribune before we really embarked on any serious AI projects was to codify an ethics policy. That's it was important for the staff to help them feel like they had agency over how we were going to use this technology, and it's important for the audience to show them, hey, we've thought about this a lot, and here's why you can trust the way we're using technology in this case. So I think the biggest questions, some of the biggest questions certainly came up at the Texas Tribune around images, and that was where we took the firmest stance we had in our ethics policy to say, like, we will not generate images. Specifically, we said we will not generate photorealistic images. But I mean, I don't think, and I'm trying to remember, and I'm not sure if this is going to change. Certainly, that this is all up for debate, and we should continue to question our own policies. But I don't think that we really encourage generation of animated images or cartoon images either. Or I think that there's a point where we should use what we have, and if we don't have it, then we have to find out we have to work around it. So I would be interested. That's not something that we've dug into in detail with AJP newsrooms, and I'd be really interested, actually, now that you mentioned it, in hearing just the broader field's take on this. As a whole, if we did a survey of our 40 newsrooms, how would they feel about using it? How many of them are actively using it? I don't think it's many, but I think it's an important question. I think personally, when I see AI generated images used in blog posts or in articles, and I think I'm not against it unless or until I see disclosure that is not sufficient for what's been generated. I think that's where I do, it kind of rubs me the wrong way when it says, like, created using Midjourney or created with AI. It's like, nobody knows what that means. Even I don't know what that means, and of all people, I probably should. So I think if you're using it, you're using it, but be very transparent about how you're using it.
Yeah, it's almost like credit Midjourney, but you also kind of want to see the prompt almost.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
is that even doable? I guess you could mouse over. There's ways to do it, I suppose, as you think about it.
Right.
It's definitely one of these things that I sort of see in terms of ethics and what individual newsrooms have decided. It varies widely.
That's true. I'm interested in it. Use it to your point about some of these concepts are very abstract. Can we use visuals to help make them clearer? I mean, I've experimented with making charts or like flow charts, for instance, diagrams, things like that. ChatGPT out of the box, not very good at it. I think some other tools are better at it. But I do think there's potential there, and just making better explanations of complicated subjects with tools. I think there's something there. I haven't dug into it much myself, I'm trying to think about the ethics on the fly here, and it doesn't rub me the wrong way as much.
Yeah. Well, one of the things why the question's even asked, when I think about it, is that at some point in the last 10 or 15 years, everything started competing in the same feeds, whether it's on social or in search. And then everyone sort of realized, everything needs an image because images are eye catching. And therefore, since we're competing with the entire internet, we got to have an image for everything. And so, you think back to, when it was just literal newspapers, and there were a lot of stories that were just column inches and a headline and some text. And maybe, what we're doing, and this is, I'm obviously using images as kind of a jumping off point to more of a discussion into what a future media ecosystem looks like. Because you think today about what is on the horizon, like the AI summaries, right? And you Google something, a news story, and you'll get a summary of it. Now, they don't do that with news yet, but Perplexity does, and others are starting to do it. But you think about, like, do I even need an image now, right? And because it's just summarizing things and people just kind of want that information, and maybe that just becomes a thing we don't quite worry about anymore. So in other words, like this is sort of a messy period where we're trying to shoehorn this next phase of information into a web 2 world, where and so I'm not saying don't worry about images. I'm just sort of thinking like what's next. And so that's kind of where I want to lead to, which is like now there's these AI summaries. They're a small but significant part of how people are getting information today. I think, in my view, they're certain to become a more important place that people get information today. Um, how do you think about this as a smaller newsroom, right? Like, there's a lot of big publishers that are making deals with OpenAI, Perplexity too. They say they're going to open that up to something that's a little more scalable. So maybe that'll happen soon. And then there's a bunch of startups that are trying to sort of attach value to content. I know there's a sort of big picture stuff, but if you're a forward thinking newsroom, like you got to be thinking about it. So how are you thinking about it, and how are they thinking about it? Do they come to you with these kind of issues? Are these more business strategy questions? How does one think about their content and their product as they try to prepare for this AI mediated future?
Yeah, I think it runs the gamut in our portfolio. I would say some of our newsrooms would say they are the first to jump on every new technology and every revenue opportunity and everything that exists. Like they're gonna go find a way to reach out directly to OpenAI or Perplexity and talk to them. Some of them are just recoiling a little bit or just frozen in place. So a lot of them are just like don't know what to do, and they look around. They're looking at us or they're looking at their peers and seeing what they're going to do, and they're going to follow in those footsteps. So I think and there's most folks are somewhere in between. So I think what I do see is, and at AJB, I think in my role and in our role at the Product and AI Studio is partly to be a little bit of a broker for some of these partnerships that can come forward. And certainly, of course, we have the relationship with OpenAI as a grantee of theirs directly. We also, for instance, we'll talk to a place. Yeah, we'd talk to a place like Perplexity and say, "Hey, we have 40 newsrooms. That is a test bed right there for you to try something new." And it could be a new funding model. It could be a new product. What would be a good example? If we have, Search GPT is a good example here. Let's say, if you come to us to Search GPT, we got 40 newsrooms ready to try it, or at least give feedback on it, or ask the questions that we want to know most about it. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can all work together. I think it's true that a lot of these places do not have the time, or it's too soon for them to be working with smaller newsrooms. And that's where I think there's a lot of groups out there. INN is another good example. And there's plenty of networks and groups of publishers that are trying to help by powering them together to do bigger deals. And I'm grateful for all of them, for all the work that they're doing. And we're certainly finding our place there.
Nice. I'm tempted to go down a Search GPT rabbit hole here, but I'm going to resist it because we've been talking for a while. So I wanted to close just on your thoughts and basically your advice for folks listening who might be reporters, they might be editors, they might be PR people, they might even be running a media organization. What is your chief piece of advice for them, particularly if they might be closer to the beginning of their AI journey?
I'd say, especially if you are bringing along a group that you need to help embrace AI, I think first thing you need to do is just bring everybody along. That's I just answered my own question, but I think if you don't have an AI policy, I think you need one. There's no shortcut to that. There's no way to say, hey, plug this in and you have an AI policy. Certainly, there's plenty of tools out there that help you consider all the things that need to go in one. But that's mostly it's a conversation starter for your organization to that having those good structured conversations about what is and isn't an ethical way to use AI is just going to be an important conversation to have. even if it's if it's a difficult one where you don't always end up with what you started with. And I think that this AI policy thing, in a way, I'm seeing this as, I'm hopeful that it's a good starter point for product leadership more broadly. That AI is kind of I don't want to call it like it's not just a figurehead for it, but it's a good example of how media organizations need to get really smarter and more serious about product thinking and smart resourcing of technology. A lot of the times when we see bad use of AI, it's because in some of the examples you mentioned of auto written stories that get published and then they get in trouble. It's because they didn't bring the newsroom into conversation. It usually involves a vendor, and it's usually there's no editor involved in that decision. And I think it's just let's have good practices around bringing the right people to the table or in technology conversations. It can't just be a tech team, and it can't just be a business team. It can't just be an editorial team either. Everyone's got to come together and agree on smart usage of these tools, whether it's something you're buying, you're building, you're partnering on. I think that's, I'm hopeful that AI is going to help people build this muscle that will apply not just to AI, but just to smart adoption of technology more broadly.
Nice. Yeah. I would definitely support all of that, and would even add perhaps you might want to make it public. In fact, I would encourage that, because there are so many ways people interact with your brand. You mentioned vendors. There's obviously readers, investors, perhaps. All of them should be able to see sort of how you are using this technology in a way that has integrity, and I think that can only fuel that integrity, and it also gets everyone on the same page. They said, "Okay, I get it. Well, you're doing it here, and not here and here," and they come to any relationship or conversation or transaction with that knowledge, and that just sort of gets ahead a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Liam, thanks so much. This has been super great. You definitely gave me some great ideas, excellent advice for me and my listeners, I hope. I hope we can regroup again soon and sort of catch up on where the state of AI is and the people that you're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Liam Andrew. If you want to check out all the cool stuff he's working on, head on over to theajp.org. And if you like what you heard, please just take a minute to leave a rating and review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out mediacopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, marketers, and content creators. Seeing you in the future.